8 years ago, a fleet of heavy-duty barges moved slowly off the coast of Southern California, carrying a cargo that looked more like a demolition site than a scientific experiment. On board were 25,000 massive concrete blocks, each one weighing several tons. One by one, with a series of thunderous splashes that sent plumes of salt water high into the air, these gray monoliths were pushed into the deep blue. To a casual observer, it looked like the state was using the Pacific Ocean as a glorified junkyard. Environmentalists were skeptical, and locals wondered if this was just another bureaucratic blunder. But this wasn't trash. This was the beginning of one of the most ambitious underwater engineering projects in North America. 8 years later, marine biologists returned to the site with high-definition cameras and deep-sea divers, and what they found hiding beneath the surface has completely shocked the scientific community. The results are nothing short of a biological miracle. And today, we are diving deep into how 25,000 blocks of concrete turned a barren underwater desert into a thriving, multi-level metropolis of marine life. To understand why California felt the need to drop 25,000 blocks into the ocean, you first have to understand what was happening to the coastline. For decades, the kelp forests of California, which are essentially the rainforests of the sea, had been retreating. Pollution, rising water temperatures, and an explosion in the population of purple sea urchins had turned vast areas of the seafloor into what scientists call urchin barrens. Imagine a wasteland where nothing grows except thousands of spiny, purple creatures that eat every single piece of vegetation that tries to take root. Without the kelp, the fish disappeared. Without the fish, the apex predators moved away. The ecosystem was collapsing in slow motion. Traditionally, scientists thought the only way to save the ocean was to leave it entirely alone. But the California Department of Fish and Wildlife decided on a more radical, hands-on approach. They realized that one of the biggest problems was a lack of three-dimensional structure. Most of the nearshore seafloor in these depleted areas was flat sand or smooth rock. There was nowhere for young fish to hide, nowhere for kelp spores to grab hold without being instantly devoured, and no surface area for filter feeders like mussels and scallops to colonize. So, they decided to build a city from scratch. The choice of material was crucial. They didn't just use any old concrete. The 25,000 blocks were cast using a special low-carbon, pH-neutral mixture. This is important because standard concrete can be too alkaline for sensitive marine larvae. Each block was designed with a specific texture, full of tiny crevices, ridges, and holes. The idea was to mimic the complexity of a natural rocky reef. When you drop these blocks into a pile, they create a labyrinth of caves and tunnels. This is the ultimate real estate for the ocean's inhabitants. When the project first started, the site was a quiet, gray patch of sand. For the first few months, it stayed that way. But then, the first miracle occurred. It's called primary succession. Microscopic algae and bacteria began to film the surface of the concrete. This thin layer of slime, which looks like nothing to us, is the foundation of everything. It provides a grip for larger organisms. Within a year, the blocks were no longer gray. They were a fuzzy brownish green. Barnacles and tiny tube worms began to cement themselves to the corners. By year 3, the transformation was accelerating. This is when the edge effect started to kick in. Because the blocks were piled in a way that created high points and low points, they altered the local currents. As water flowed over the blocks, it created tiny whirlpools and upwellings. This brought nutrient-rich water from the deeper layers up to the surface of the reef. Plankton gathered in these swirls. And where there is plankton, there are fish. Small schools of blacksmith and senorita fish began to hover over the concrete mounds. They weren't just passing through. They had found a home. But the real shock came when researchers did their 5-year checkup. They expected some fish, maybe some crabs, but they didn't expect the kelp. Against all odds, giant kelp had managed to find a foothold on the highest points of the concrete blocks. Because the blocks raised the kelp spores up off the sandy bottom, they were out of reach of the heavy concentrations of sea urchins on the seafloor. The kelp grew with staggering speed, sometimes up to 2 feet in a single day, reaching for the sunlight at the surface. Suddenly, the concrete blocks weren't just a pile of rocks. They were the anchors for a brand new forest. Now, 8 years later, the site is unrecognizable. If you were to dive there today, you wouldn't even see the concrete. The blocks are completely encrusted with a living skin of anemones, sponges, gorgonians, and bryozoans. It looks like a vibrant Technicolor coral reef transplanted into the temperate waters of California. The biodiversity at the site is now estimated to be 600% higher than the surrounding sandy areas. It has become a self-sustaining ecosystem that is actually exporting life to other parts of the coast. One of the most unbelievable results is the return of the giant sea bass. These are the kings of the California coast, weighing up to 500 pounds and living for half a century. They had become incredibly rare in this region. But because the 25,000 blocks created large caves and high canopy kelp forests, the giant sea bass have returned to use the area as a spawning ground. Seeing these gentle giants gliding through the concrete-reinforced kelp forest is like seeing a dinosaur return to the woods. It is proof that if you build the right habitat, the wildlife will find its way back. Scientists are also fascinated by the carbon sink effect of this project. Kelp is one of the most efficient carbon sequesters on the planet. By providing a stable foundation for 25,000 blocks worth of kelp, California has essentially created a massive underwater carbon scrubbing machine. This helps to locally mitigate the effects of ocean acidification, making the water around the reef healthier for shell-building organisms like scallops and lobsters. Speaking of lobsters, the concrete reef has become a goldmine for them. The deep crevices between the blocks are the perfect bunkers for California's spiny lobsters to hide in during the day, coming out at night to hunt across the new reef. The project has been so successful that it has completely changed the way we think about artificial versus natural. In the past, artificial reefs were often seen as a poor substitute for the real thing. But the 8-year data from the 25,000 blocks shows that, when designed correctly, an engineered reef can actually perform better in some ways than a degraded natural one. It provides a jump start to nature. It's like a biological starter motor for the ocean. The logistics of managing 25,000 blocks over 8 years also yielded some surprising engineering data. Scientists used sonar mapping to track if the blocks had shifted or sunk into the sand. Surprisingly, the reef has remained incredibly stable. The weight of the blocks and the way they were interlocked prevented them from being scattered by the massive swells of the North Pacific. In fact, as they became covered in biological growth, the entire structure became even more unified. Mussels and oysters act like a biological glue, further cementing the blocks together. This project has sparked a massive wave of interest globally. Countries from North America to Asia are now looking at the California block model as a way to protect their coastlines from erosion. Because the reef acts as a submerged breakwater, it absorbs the energy of incoming waves before they hit the beach. This protects the shoreline without the need for ugly, expensive seawalls on the beach itself. It's a win-win. You get a thriving underwater paradise and a protected coastline. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Researchers had to closely monitor the site to ensure it didn't become a haven for invasive species. In some artificial reef projects, non-native organisms can take over because the new territory is empty. However, the sheer density and diversity of the native California species that occupied the 25,000 blocks seemed to create a full house effect. Native kelp bass and sheephead fish moved in so quickly and in such numbers that they effectively defended the territory from intruders. The psychological impact on the local community has also been profound. What started as a controversial project has become a point of pride. Local divers and fishermen report that the block forest, as it is colloquially known, is now the most productive spot on the coast. It has turned into a center for citizen science, with hobbyist divers uploading photos of rare nudibranch and fish species they've spotted on the blocks to global databases. Perhaps the most heartening discovery made at the 8-year mark was the presence of recruitment. This is a fancy scientific word for babies. Researchers found that the reef wasn't just attracting adult fish from elsewhere. It was a nursery. They found juvenile rockfish, tiny octopuses, and larval kelp, all thriving in the protected zones created by the concrete. This means the reef isn't just a hotel. It's a home where new generations are being born. This is the ultimate goal of any conservation project. The 25,000 blocks have also helped scientists understand more about the connectivity of the ocean. By tagging fish at the reef, they discovered that these animals are using the block forest as a staging ground before moving out to colonize other natural reefs nearby. It acts as a bridge, allowing life to flow across previously barren stretches of sand. This has led to plans for a blue corridor, a series of these structured reefs along the entire California coast to link up the fragmented kelp forests. As we look at the high-definition footage of the reef today, it's hard to remember that beneath all that color and movement is just plain, gray concrete. Nature has a way of claiming everything we give it, provided we give it in the right way. The 25,000 blocks weren't an intrusion, they were an invitation, and the ocean answered in a way that no one could have predicted. The success of the California project is a message of hope. In an era where we often hear only about the decline of our oceans, it proves that we have the tools and the engineering capability to not just protect what's left, but to actively move toward restoration. We can't just be passive observers of the environment anymore. We have to be active participants. The results from 8 years ago show that with a little bit of concrete and a lot of scientific foresight, we can rebuild the worlds we've lost. When researchers first proposed dropping 25,000 blocks, they were told it was too much, too expensive, and too risky. They were told that the ocean wouldn't accept them. But the ocean didn't just accept the blocks. It embraced them. It turned them into a foundation for life that is now more resilient than the natural areas surrounding it. This resilience is key, especially as our oceans face the challenges of a changing climate. Structured reefs like this one are more stable and can provide a thermal refuge for species as the water around them warms. The data gathered over the last 8 years is now being used to design smart reefs. These are the next generation of concrete structures, incorporating even more complex shapes and maybe even sensors to monitor conditions in real time. But none of that would be possible without the brave experiment of the 25,000 blocks. They were the pioneers of a new way of thinking about marine conservation. One of the most surprising inhabitants of the reef is the California sea lion. Divers often find these intelligent mammals playing in the kelp forests that grow from the blocks. They use the structure as a hunting ground, darting in and out of the crevices to find fish. The reef has created a whole new vertical hunting ground for them, which didn't exist when the area was just flat sand. It's a reminder that every level of the food chain benefits when you add complexity to the environment. The water clarity around the 25,000 blocks has also improved significantly. This is thanks to the millions of filter feeders like mussels and sea squirts that have carpeted the concrete. These tiny animals are the ocean's vacuum cleaners, stripping organic matter and pollutants from the water column. A single mussel can filter up to 15 gallons of water a day. Multiply that by the millions of organisms on the reef, and you have a massive, natural water purification plant. As the study enters its 9th year, the excitement hasn't faded. In fact, it's growing. Scientists are now looking at how the reef might be influencing the local weather and even the wave patterns that reach the shore. The unbelievable results mentioned in our title aren't just a hook. They are a direct quote from many of the scientists who have been on this journey since day one. They are seeing a level of biological productivity that usually takes centuries to develop in nature, happening in less than a decade. If there is one lesson to take away from the 25,000 concrete blocks, it's that structure is the key to life. In a world that is becoming more homogenized and flat, providing complexity gives life a fighting chance. Whether it's a forest on land or a concrete reef in the ocean, diversity thrives in the nooks and crannies. We just have to be the ones to provide the foundation. Looking at the reef today, you see a masterclass in collaboration. Collaboration between engineers who designed the blocks, biologists who studied the life cycles, and the state of California which provided the funding. But mostly, it's a collaboration with nature herself. We provided the skeleton, and the ocean provided the flesh and blood. It is a beautiful, thriving partnership that shows no signs of slowing down. The 25,000 blocks are a standing testament to the power of human ingenuity when it's aligned with the needs of the planet. They remind us that the ocean is not a bottomless pit, nor is it a fragile flower that will break if we touch it. It is a powerful, dynamic force that is ready to regenerate if we just give it the right support. 8 years ago, this was an experiment. Today, it is a blueprint. Every coastal city in the world is now looking at these results and asking the same question: where can we put our 25,000 blocks? The era of the ocean city has begun, and it's a world where the boundaries between the human-made and the natural are becoming beautifully blurred. Think about the sheer amount of life supported by those blocks. Millions of individual animals, each one playing a part in a grand, underwater symphony. All of it started with a splash. All of it started with a bunch of concrete blocks that everyone thought were trash. It just goes to show that you should never judge a project by its surface. Sometimes, the most boring-looking materials can create the most spectacular results. The California project has also proved to be economically beneficial. The increase in fish populations has supported local recreational fishing, and the reef has become a world-class destination for scuba diving tourism. This blue economy is showing that conservation is not a drain on resources, but a creator of them. It provides a tangible return on investment that goes far beyond just biological data. As we conclude our look at this amazing project, we have to wonder what the next 8 years will bring. Will the reef continue to expand? Will the kelp forests become even denser? Will new, even rarer species move in? The scientific community is watching with bated breath. Based on what we've seen so far, the answer is almost certainly a resounding yes. The concrete is now hidden, but the foundation remains. It is a reminder that the work we do today can provide a home for generations of life that we will never even see. It's an act of faith in the future of our oceans. And in the case of California's 25,000 blocks, that faith has been rewarded 10,000 times over. The story doesn't end here. There are plans to expand the project, to use new materials and even more complex designs. But the original reef will always be the one that proved it could be done. It will always be the site of that unbelievable transformation from a sandy wasteland to a living masterpiece. So, next time you are standing on a beach in California, looking out at the waves, remember what's happening down there. Remember the 25,000 blocks. Remember the giant sea bass and the swaying kelp and the millions of tiny filter feeders. The ocean is alive, and in some places it's more alive than ever, thanks to a bold experiment and a lot of concrete. The results are indeed unbelievable, but they are very real. They are a call to action for all of us to think bigger about how we can help our planet. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, and we have the ocean's incredible will to survive on our side. All we need is the courage to take the plunge and drop those first few blocks of our own. The future of the ocean is being built right now, one block at a time. And if the results from California are any indication, that future is going to be absolutely spectacular. It's a world of color, growth, and hope, hidden just a few miles off the coast, waiting for us to dive in and see for ourselves. The scientific discovery of the century might not be in a lab or a telescope. It might be right there, under the waves, growing on a piece of concrete. It's a discovery of resilience, of partnerships, and of the incredible power of a simple idea. 25,000 blocks, 8 years, and one unbelievable result. This is the new frontier of marine science, and we are just getting started. As the sun sets over the Pacific, it illuminates a coastline that is healthier and more vibrant than it was a decade ago. Beneath the surface, the reef is waking up for its night shift. Lobsters are emerging, octopuses are hunting, and the kelp is swaying in the dark currents. The 25,000 blocks are doing their job, providing a sanctuary in the sea, a monument to our better nature, and a promise of a blue world that will continue to thrive long after we are gone. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of California's best-kept secrets. The story of the blocks is a story for all of us, a reminder that we can fix what we've broken, and that nature is always ready for a comeback. Keep looking beneath the surface, because you never know what unbelievable things you might find. Until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep exploring the amazing wonders of our blue planet. The ocean is big, and our problems can seem even bigger. But sometimes, the solution is as solid as a block of concrete. It's a literal foundation for a better world, and it's already half done. The blocks are there, the life is there, and the results are undeniable. Now it's up to us to keep that momentum going, to keep learning, and to keep building a world where both humans and the ocean can thrive together in a beautiful, mirroring dance of survival and growth. The 25,000 blocks are more than just concrete. They are a symbol of what happens when we stop being consumers of the ocean and start being its architects. A symbol of hope that is currently growing, flourishing, and breathing right now, just off the coast of California. And that in itself is the most unbelievable result of all.